check aside.
Go.
Okay, so for what specifically do you do to enhance the students' learning? I talked about differentiating the lessons for the different types of learners you have in your classroom. So like students that are at higher abilities, lower abilities, and also like depending on what intelligences those students have, differentiating the lessons for those, making the lessons more meaningful. Making connections to each of the students, so it's important to like get to know them well so that you're able to do that with your lessons. And then also as the emotional well-being part of that question, just treating each of your students with respect so that you get respect in return from them.
Alright, and I found an article by Patrick Love and Ann Love, and they talked about how to enhance holistic learning, which is pretty much the same thing as the question asked. And instead of using solely lecture-based instruction, use what they call the liberation theory, which is that society's culture system perpetrates power relationships and holds people. Use the constructivist pedagogy, which is where where teachers must provide a learning environment where students search for meaning, appreciate uncertainty, and inquire responsibility. And it helps students take ownership of their learning, be autonomous thinkers, and pose and seek to answer important questions. And it also talked about collaborative learning, which enhances learning by actively incorporating social and affective dynamics between students.
Alright, one of the things I would do is just to allow them to be social, which is from the article Cone from 1993. High school students are very social, so don't fight that. To anyone who's ever met a teenager, like, friends are the most important thing, so make it work for your students. Using projects and problems, it can enhance their learning development, emotional well-being. Just encouraging individual personalities or like a community of like acceptance and caring is important. Cone, his 91 article titled Caring Kids, found that students were naturally caring at the age of 4 during a study. Like, they did a study with 4-year-olds, and they found that they were naturally caring, and that competition in other school as they went through schooling kind of beat that out of them. So if we're not naturally competitive, and we shouldn't have to put others down in order to be like, well off emotionally and stuff. So just not setting up your environment in that kind of way, and instead communicate like reciprocal respect, where everyone respects everyone, and you as the teacher also respects everyone. And then allowing for cooperative learning is really good too, because you get to practice social skills and construct meanings together, I guess. So.
Question 14. What are your secrets for keeping your students motivated and engaged? My information came from a article entitled Motivating Students. One of the things they said is to give frequent, early, and positive feedback to your students so they know how they are doing. Assign tasks at their developmental level so it's not too hard or not too easy. Relate the topic to real life so they can make those connections. Create the atmosphere in your classroom that's open and positive so they can ask questions and feel comfortable failing, and so they know what to do better for next time. And have a sense of community where your whole class works together and you're all there for each other. And
I said allowing your students to set goals for themselves motivates them to work towards those, and keeps them engaged. Having your lessons planned ahead of time so that the students are always having something to do, and that they're always engaged in your classroom and continuously learning. And then also just knowing your students so that you can plan activities that interest them will motivate them even more.
In some ways that I'm going to keep my students motivated and engaged is to be enthusiastic and not have a monotone voice and make them bored of whatever we're doing. Make the material we're learning relevant to their lives. Teach transferable skills. Provide feedback for achievement. Use questioning to make students think and answer. Use discussions. Make learning itself interesting, and I'll also use like project-based learning and student-based learning just so it keeps them having to actually do something and not just listen to a lecture, just listen to the teacher talk about something that doesn't even interest them, gets the students actually engaged in what we're learning.
Yeah, I said make it relatable to their and valuable to the students and their time. Students need to know why they're doing something, so explaining your rationale for teaching is always important. Just make it applicable to their lives or to real life. And I kind of mentioned earlier, project-based learning is like a gateway to this because problem-based learning, it's like it establishes a problem and then there's an instant like value to actually learning the material that would help you solve the problem. It's not as painful as just like trying to get them to pay attention to you. If you use rewards and punishments, those are ways to hinder motivation. So from Cone, his Caring Kids article, since they're naturally caring, when you punish them, you ruin their trust and it like breeds like resentment out of you. So they're not going to learn from someone they don't trust or respect, as mentioned earlier from Poplin. So keeping that out of the classroom, rewards and punishments aren't good. I guess telling them to set goals and then helping them set reasonable goals and like having them accomplish it and like going back and having them look at the progress that they've made as students in your classroom is a good way to increase motivation. Let's see, minimizing competition, I've kind of mentioned this, but yeah, if you've got a reason to compete for something, then it's like an extrinsic motivator instead of an intrinsic one. So not just, bringing motivation to your classroom, bringing the right kind of motivation into your classroom. Addressing students' basic needs is another one. Make sure their self-confidence is high, self-worth. Many leading motivation theories attribute high motivation to high self-confidence in themselves or feeling they can succeed in that classroom, and project-based learning can help with this too. So.
Alrighty, our last and final question. Please share your best practices for meeting the needs of every student you work with while maintaining high standards, high expectations, and a strong connection with each student. One way I would do that was varying lesson plans at different levels so all students can participate no matter what level of development they're at. Having the class work with students that have special needs to get them comfortable with this and allowing them to see that not all people are the same and to work with them because it can benefit them, both partners. Just being organized and allowing so your class time runs smoothly. Having a conference with each of the students to make that connection and asking them how they're doing and having them give you feedback on how the class is going. Another idea would to have like a teacher-student journal like Stacey had mentioned before, just to keep that communication open. And also a newsletter to parents because having the parents on your side is also a big idea, and so you have parents, students, and teachers working together.
Yeah, I basically wrote down a lot of stuff that I've already talked about in the discussion, but just to kind of recover those, I said don't be afraid to reteach something if it wasn't clearly taught the first time. And also, I know I talked a lot about doing like individual lessons with students and like allowing them to reflect and set goals, but I think that's really important. And I saw it used in my lesson 2 or level 2 field experience. So, and it seemed to work really well for my mentor teacher. So I think that's something that I'll definitely take from that and use in my own classroom. It just kind of like motivates the students, lets them see what they're doing well, what they can improve on, and then allows them to set goals to work towards. And then also I said to know when to move on. You might not be able to teach every student well about every topic you discuss, but you can try your best and go with that. And then also the last thing I said was don't expect less than the best from each of your students, and I think that's like a good motto just to live by. Just constantly remind them, like, are you trying your best in the class? Like, you're not going to get anything out of it, like, unless you try your best. So I think that's a good motto, classroom motto.
Good. A lot of the points that I'm gonna say have to go along with Carly or Amanda's points. I said use differentiated instruction, as well as student-based learning with me as a guidance, just to be there to answer questions if they need help or just anything that they need help with. And also project-based learning, which will keep the students engaged and helps them work with their peers and just have that connection with them. And like Carly said, individual conferences with the students to check on how they are doing and get feedback from them, and just create an environment that's open and positive and warm to all the students.
Good job, Stacey.
Yep. All right. Wrap it up. Just know the skill levels of all your students so that you can best serve their needs. Take your time with them. That's your job. You're there to help them learn. Sometimes it is hard. Just set up your classroom so that it's learner-centered, not teacher-centered. Sometimes you will have to have points where they just have to listen to you, but you should really encourage the creative thinking and stuff that can occur during learner-centered learning. Think of your students as thinkers. Don't just treat them as they don't really know what's going on, but treat them as if they can think about things, so that way they can come up with solutions on their own. Talked about journaling before, to keep a communication open. I think you mentioned that too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then find something great from every student, and just challenge them. Don't make it too easy or even too hard, but you could always guide them through something that's too hard. If it's too easy, they're not going to get anything out of it. So keeping that. Green and Johnson say goal setting is important to help promote intrinsic motivation. So when both the student and teacher work together to create an atmosphere where the student is creating what they need to get better at, then reciprocal respect increases. And so reciprocal respect is really important because with Poplin's article, she mentioned something about how if they respect you and trust you, then they'll want to learn from you. But if that's gone, they're not going to want to sit there in your classroom. So those are some of my pointers, I guess.
We didn't know if we mentioned our names at the beginning, so I'm Carly Neiman.
I'm Amanda Vickers.
I'm Mackenzie Gustafson.
Stacey Carnahan.
Thanks for watching our video.
Finish the show.